Howdy, Vine Trippers. I wanted to take just a moment to talk to you about the Texas Wine Lover website and their phone app for both iPhones as well as Google devices. You can actually download this app, put it on your phone, or just go to the website if you're not an app person. And if you ever want to go visit some of these great locations that we've been talking about in the podcast, this will give you a great information about the place before you go. And you'll be able to find other wineries in the area. So if you want to make a day of it, go see several other places as well. You can search by region. You can sort the listings, find ones that are kid-friendly, family-friendly, even ones that host RVs. All kinds of different sortable listings you can find there in that app and on the website. You can find other things as well in the area like restaurants, accommodations, maybe events that are going on at the different wineries. So it's your one-stop resource that goes hand in hand with this podcast to be able to find those great places to go visit. So check out the Texas Wine Lover website. It's txwinelover.com. Or go to their app. You can find it on the Google Play Store or the Apple Store as well. Enjoy your trips among the vines and use that app. Welcome to Texas Under Vine, an exploratory podcast to scout out the best that Texas wine country has to offer. I'm your wine guide, Scott, and I'm here to lead you on an auditory expedition to the vineyards and wineries across the great Lone Star State. Each episode will cover a different vineyard, winery, or wine-related business operating in Texas. You'll hear interviews, descriptions, and details about each location that will excite you to visit and experience them for yourself. Ready to plan a wine tour? Use these episodes to choose the most interesting spots for you and your friends to check out. Most of all, enjoy hearing about the rapidly growing wine industry in the state and what makes our wines and wineries the best. Howdy, fellow Vine Tripper. Welcome to episode 40 for Texas Under Vine. And for this episode, I'm actually staying close to home here in Austin, and I'm going to visit the Austin Winery in South Austin. Now, this winery is owned by Ross McLauchlan, Cooper Anderson, and Matthew Smith. They actually opened their doors all the way back in 2013 in Austin. At that time, the location was actually in a different place than they are now, but they are thriving in an area called The Yard. It's a kind of warehouse shopping district area, I guess you could call it, in South Austin, and got a great facility there. It's really fun to visit. Whenever they set up their winery scenario, they wanted it to feel more like a really casual brew pub style experience, more so than a fancy white tablecloth style experience, because they just felt like that would really kind of push people away from wine. And they're really focused on trying to get more, especially urban people, into tasting wine. And it's a more non-threatening way to check out great wine in Austin. And like I said a few minutes ago, it's located in an area called The Yard. It's a really cool little area there because they're surrounded by other little businesses that you can go to. There's a sake production facility, a coffee shop, distillery, all kinds of really cool, fun little places. Matter of fact, you could probably make a whole day just moving around from place to place, but always start with the Austin Winery when you go. Now, when it comes to their wines, they are 100% Texas. They do source a little bit of fruit from the High Plains, but they really try to get most of their fruit from the Texas Hill Country and the Central Texas area. So that's where their main focus is, based on weather, based on different things every year with great production. Sometimes they may have to go a little bit out of that region, but they really want the majority of their fruit to be very local here in Central Texas and in that Hill Country AVA. And they're doing some really kind of experimental and fun things with their wines. When you go in, they actually have some clay amphoras where they are making their white wines and they're doing them old world style with the skin contact to make them orange wines. At least this year, that's how they produce their white wines. So you get to try some new things. It gives a different take on white wines if you've never tried an orange wine. Gives it a little bit, because the skins are there, you get a little bit of that tannin from the skins. And so it gives it almost like a tea tea characteristic. Some people have compared orange wines even to tasting like bourbon or whiskey or things like that. So it gives a different flavor to their white wines. It's very popular right now. And so they decided this year that all of their white wines would be done in that orange style. So if you've never tried that, what a great opportunity to go check it out here at the Austin Winery. They also host some pretty cool events there at their location. They recently just had a very collaboratory experience that they host called Bigger in Texas, where they invite wineries from all over the state to come in and set up shop there in their location so that people can come in for this event and taste wine from different places all over the state, where you might have to drive, I think Ross said, is something like 1,500 miles round trip if you were going to try to visit all these places in Texas, because we're such a huge state. But you can get samples of them all at that one event, and that's called the Bigger in Texas event. So that's a fun one to look out for. They also recently celebrated their 10th birthday anniversary and had a big party for that. So they love to put on events. You can rent out the place, all kinds of really fun stuff they do at the Austin Winery. Now, when you go to visit and you want to do a tasting, in the interview, you'll hear Ross says that their tastings, they try to make them confusingly easy. I love that phrasing because they want it to be as relaxed and as casual as possible, so it's not intimidating to the average person coming in who maybe doesn't know very much about wine or wants to explore some new things, like maybe those orange wines that I talked about a moment ago. And so it's a very simple and easy tasting process. Ross will cover a little bit more of that in the interview. And by the way, while I'm here, I did get to sit down with Ross for a little while and talk to him. So we're going to go to that interview so you can hear some of his stories about how the winery was started, some of his background, and how that philosophy really led into what they're doing today in this kind of casual brew pub style environment. And I look forward for you to hearing his story. So without further ado, let's go hear from Ross. All right, well, I'm here with Ross McLauchlan at Austin Winery, and he is the CEO and founder of this winery. So we're going to learn a little bit about this place, and I'm going to ask Ross a couple of questions here. So Ross, first tell me, how did you get into the wine industry?
Pretty fortunately, I wasn't born into the wine industry. Neither actually nobody in our business here at the Austin Winery was sort of legacy winemaker or anything like that. Truthfully, I wanted to work for Anthony Bourdain, and unfortunately, he didn't get my memos in time.
Rest in power.
I studied at University of Texas. I was a European Studies major, which is a very broad language, politics, economics sort of thing. And then I also had degrees in radio, television, film, and nutrition, thinking along those lines of getting into entertainment in that regard. Again, like winemaking, though, I didn't have any experience or connection there. And I met one of my business partners, Cooper Anderson, playing soccer in my last semester at University of Texas. I had just come back from studying abroad in Barcelona, where I staged a little for a cava production there. But I think when you're 21 and studying abroad, you're going to love everything you're going to do, and drinking and speaking, some Spanish and Catalan. But as a result, I come back and I have one more semester, and Cooper had just moved down from Virginia. He was working in some hill country wineries, didn't have any friends, and, needed some buddies. So I got him a soccer team and some friends. He got me a job out there. And before you knew it, we were on the first steps of our career together. So that was the start there.
All right. And then how did that lead to the founding of the Austin Winery?
So after I ultimately graduated, I went to work for a wine broker called the Mark Wine Group. And that was really a intermediary that, we're all familiar with the three-tiered system. And what he did was he actually just represented family-owned wineries, but 2 national accounts. And so I was a liaison of bringing national buyers out to these smaller wineries in California and Oregon, and we represented, say, 12 wineries in that region. And at a very young age, I got to kind of be a fly on the wall, and I got this exposure point to all these different styles of running a winery, styles of making wine, and also ultimately, I realized, previously I didn't realize that most people weren't making wine with all estate-grown fruit, and then many people didn't even own vineyards. And so the sort of light clicked on that I was like, oh my God, this isn't a you need $5 million to start a winery, right? That's what you always assume, right? I'm like, okay, really, I think we could get some winemaking equipment, secure some sourcing. This is, a couple $100,000 is, much more in reach. So Cooper and I started Negociant, sort of blending other people's finished wines just to sort of see where we were at in our competency. We saw a big gap in the market in Austin. If you think 10 years back from now, how many Texas wines you saw present in off-premise grocers, liquor stores, or on-premise in wine lists, by the glass in particular, it was really hard to find. But conversely, we had a really high food IQ here in Austin. And so I thought that people would engage with wine if it was more in like the brew pub model, right? I think that there's this communal casualness, energy and culture that Austin has. And I felt like if we show the blue collar side of production, the green thumb side of it, and sort of remove the white tablecloth, then people will engage with it and meet with it without this sort of structure of intimidation or foreignness, or that wine was going to make them feel dumb about themselves, because nobody wants to do that in their free time. So that was sort of the impetus and how we, the inception of the idea.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when did you get started?
We opened our doors in May of 2023. And so, I'm sorry, May of 2013.
Okay. All right.
So we're just coming at our 10-year mark right now. And it took us a long time, though, to really kind of climb the ladder on the contract list of being important, relevant, reliable. I can't blame most farmers if 24-year-old me and Cooper and Matt came up to them and saying that we wanted to source fruit and we had a urban winery in Austin, Texas, I probably would have them at the bottom of the list too. But in time, we grew. We've been very active in working in the vineyards as well. We're super tied to a vineyard management company here in the Hill Country called Precision Viticulture, and shortly and slowly, we started to produce wines of good quality and from good provenance. And, a big thing for us is transparency and education. So all of our bottles will have vineyard designate, the varietal blend, if any, if we added any SO2, and the case production numbers. And I think in terms of increasing the IQ and the exposure of local drinkers, it's really important to know the AVAs and then the vineyards and the varietals. So I think that's helped us or endeared us to some. So yeah.
Well, and you mentioned Matt. How does he figure in this journey?
Matt handles all. He's their chief of operations. So he was the third member of the triumvirate that before we opened, we were like, okay, we really need somebody at the switch point. So he handles all accounting, administration. We're in an extremely rigid sort of paperwork business, right, with a lot of government oversight. So all that reporting, and we do export to Canada, Hong Kong, distribute in multiple states. So there's a whole operation that, from a sales and winemaking perspective, you really need somebody in the middle there, keeping it all together. So he handles all that for us.
And how did your background in working with the three-tiered system and working with a merchant, or
broker?
The broker. How did that help you with now your distribution? You do a lot of distribution?
We do. Well, when we first started, before we got to, we produced about 6,000 cases annually. Previously, when we were in the 2,000 to 4,000 range, you really do, at that margin, you need to be selling the most of your wine direct to consumer or through the tasting room, which had been the case. And then when COVID restrictions hit, there's no tasting room traffic, right? So that model really had to flip. So we were really at a point where we were at about 75% direct to consumer, 25% wholesale, which was about exposure, about people seeing and learning about our wines. It was more of a marketing cost almost, right? Then that really flipped. And during the COVID period, we were at almost 75-25 the other way, right? So now we're in this really healthy split where we're increasing in our production of wine. We have healthy traffic coming in the winery, but it also is being driven by exposure of people having our wines, if we're in Central Market in Dallas, if we're in Los Angeles in a hip spot or New York, people end up coming to Austin for for all kinds of reasons, usually not just for us, but hopefully we can take, an hour of their time and convince your significant other to taste some wine with you to start the day. And that seemed to work pretty well.
And how did you find this place?
So initially we were in a really crummy warehouse slip, and I recommend anybody, if you're starting your business and you don't have endless money, you should start with really low operational costs. So we were actually, the street was called Tuscany Way, but it's actually the street that you go to if they like lose your mail, like where the UPS fleet is, right? So the funniest thing is people who were, little office warehouse commercial strip, people would come out and they'd call us and they'd be like, we must be lost. I don't think we're here. We're like, no, you're here, come on in. And that was where we started. We barely had, we didn't actually have running water in the cellar. So we had an IBC tote that we would fill, that we'd run through a hot water heater to sanitize, that we're using for cleaning. But when you start, with poor equipment, poor infrastructure, and you can make good product therein, then you've earned the right kind of to go forward. So where we are today is a region called the Yard. We're just South Congress and St. Elmo. So about 7 minutes from downtown, which is really terrific. But we're also in this wonderful community of next door. We share a wall with a coffee roaster who has beer taps. There's a sake production, there's a distillery, and there's 2 other breweries. So there's quite a kind of, not everybody runs the whole block, but, there's a lot of overlap and cross-reference and customers visiting, like-minded businesses. So it's great because these are all industrial producing businesses with a customer-facing aspect still in the center hub of Austin.
You can almost do your own little pub crawl just right along the way here.
Yeah,
place to place.
That's why we like to be the first to open. Yeah.
There you go. Well, this may be kind of a silly question, but what led you to the name? What led you to think, I'm going to call it the Austin Winery?
Well, it's, as I always actually joke about this often, that it's pretty embarrassing how long it took us to come up with that name. Like we were trying to, think of all these, clever, subtle, nuanced names. And, what we realized is, look, we're first to market. We're the only people, and still to this day, are the only people making wine within the city limits. There's a lot of structure and oversight that goes into making wine in the first place federally. Then state level is usually just kind of a copy of that. But within the city, when we went to do our permits, they're like, well, we don't have any wineries. Like, we're not really sure where you guys file. It was completely foreign.
We don't know how to handle this.
Literally, like the fire review guy, he's like, all right, now when you're brewing this stuff, I'm like, no brewing. We're not cooking anything up here, very low fire risk. And so, it took us a while to come to that, but I thought that it was one, sounds bigger than we are, right? There's also the ease of, all you have to know is, what are you drinking and where are we, right? And I think that part of us trying to be very transparent, clear, and, understated in a way too, that I thought that this sort of helped carry that mission, that it was very, very even keeled. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So being an urban winery, you don't have a vineyard out front or anything like that, or out back, I presume. Where do you source most of your fruit?
Well, right now we're at about a 50% split between the hill country and the high plains.
Okay.
As you know, most of the hill country wineries we're sourcing, usually up to about 75% of their fruit was coming from the high plains. Thankfully, we've had good new plantings and regenerative and restorative work in the vineyards. A lot of which has been done by people like Precision Viticulture. And I think also plantings that occurred maybe 5 to 10 years ago, those wines are finally coming to producing time. And so that's been a really great thing for us, because we also want to be active in the vineyard. Cooper and Adrian were just out pruning in Wimberley last week, and the more intimacy we have with the vines and the better connection we have with the grower is going to help us project, have better foresight and better awareness of what's going to be, the conditions of the grapes as we harvest them, right? And we all know that winemaking does start in the vineyard. So, if you're just setting bricks marks for where you want your grapes to be harvested, there's a lot that can be lost within that before they're on your crush
in
pad.
that equation, right?
Yeah. So we really prefer doing hill country work. Also, it's our nearest AVA. But the High Plains is wonderful for reduction in disease pressure. That higher altitude, I mean, it is a totally different AVA. And last year was one of those not all too rare, but rare occasions where there was really wonderful production in both regions. I always think it's good to have a diverse portfolio of where you're sourcing from, because acts of God and nature, are all too common. But those are really the two regions that we're most active with.
I gotcha. So 100% Texas.
100% Texas fruit.
And do you have like a crush pad here, or do they crush them there and then you bring here?
Typically everything arrives here on stem.
Whole cluster?
Whole cluster. So we run it through our own crusher destemmer. We have a pretty small but mighty press right there. But yeah, typically everything, sometimes in the High Plains we'll have, if it's a large vineyard, we'll take it and consolidate it and just crush into stem, but then having must here. But everything otherwise is still grape to glass right here.
Okay. Well, and that kind of leads to the follow-up part of the question. So you do all the production here in this location where the tasting room is.
Yeah, no satellite location or anybody doing custom crush for us like that. I mean, it's one of the things we really take a ton of pride in, is that we every aspect of our winemaking, we're solidly in control of. So
you get to sit here and taste your wines right around where the magic is done, all around you.
That's right. And it's all native yeast fermentation. So this facility has its own ambient yeast now that we've been operating in here for almost 7 years. And I think that often the similarity is the way Jester King has sort of a signature, their sour, right? Our yeast that is cultivated in here tends to have something that I think is very unique to us. Without overpowering the character of the terroir. Yeah.
Well, what are the type of wines that you like to produce here?
We do a really large range, to be honest, but one of the things that I thought was really fun this year is all of our white wines, quote unquote, we did a certain amount of skin contact to all of them. So they're all orange wine, okay? So there was this sort of fetishization or this sort of obsession with in vogueness.
The hot thing right now.
Yeah, of orange wine. And what we wanted to do is show the breadth of that category. So we have a couple wines that are skin contact in that, and I say that with maybe less than 4 days of skin contact, so just a little kiss of texture to them. A couple wines that are more in that caricature of orange wine, right? You can tell just from looking at it, very high acid, but still pithy and good skin contact. And then we have a couple wines that we do in these amphora over here, which are more in that amber wine, like, Georgia or Albania. And those tend to be a little,
really old world
old world, right? A little slightly more oxidized potentially, but usually have like this wonderful balance of acid and like a tea note in the tannin. And we've had really good success just sort of, expanding people's horizons with that. And, I'm always, I think, by and large, like with Texas wine in general, I'm fine with people being skeptical, right? Healthy skepticism. Just taste with us and let us show you, a bit of what's out there.
And is it mostly dry, or do you do any sweet?
We do. We haven't done any sweet wine because of native yeast fermentation. Everything needs to go all the way dry. With the exception of that, we do make a vermouth, which has a little bit of residual sugar, and it's all locally foraged botanicals too. So that's really lovely over ice cream or just on its own with a little soda water too.
Cool.
Howdy, Vine Trippers. Did you know that I now have a merchandise store for Texas Under Vine? I only have a handful of limited items, but you can go check those out and wear your Texas Under Vine swag if you'd like to tell all your friends about the great wine locations we have here in Texas and maybe get them interested in the podcast as well. So there are things like t-shirts, there's a hoodie, there's a beanie, a ball cap, things like that. But one of the most exciting things I have right now is my limited time offer t-shirt. That's my season 1 t-shirt. So this is your Tasting Through Texas Under Vine season 1 t-shirt. It's only going to be available for a little short amount of time. On the back, it has all the different locations like a band tour t-shirt. So this is a limited time item and you can go out and get it now. And one of the great things about that t-shirt is a portion of every sale goes to support the Texas Hill Country Winery Scholarship Fund. So you know that by buying that t-shirt, you're also investing in the growing and flourishing of an amazing wine industry here in Texas and all of those people that are going to come and make it even better. Check out that merchandise store. It's on my website at texasundervine.com. Just go up to the top. You'll see the link for the merchandise store.
So, and I know this is a hard question for many winemakers, but what are your favorite wines to make? What do you just really like? I really like, oh, we got a batch of this. I love making that.
We had a lot of success. We really loved a really soft maceration of a Cerasuolo style, which is like a Sicilian style of a chillable red. Being in Texas, your red wine, big robust red wine drinking season is typically quite limited. And for me, I want something that, is a red wine that I can pair with seafood, with light grilled meats, with pasta, but that I can drink without breaking a sweat. So slightly lower alcohol, nice skin contact, good like lip smacky stem tannins, whole cluster. Like this Mourvedre is really terrific for that, with a long finish, I hate when you have a wine, it's like just cold and wet and it's gone, Drinking's fun, but I'm good at it. So it's nice to have something that I can expand and stretch
Enjoy
over
that
time. Yeah,
thing.
exactly.
Well, in kind of from the other half of the coin, so what are some of your most popular wines with customers? What do you find that people say, oh, you got to taste this when you go to Austin Winery?
Well, I kind of think about it like you're building out an album, right? If you're a musician, which I am certainly not. But you kind of want something that's really approachable. First thing is you want something that's really approachable, something, a ballad with something with a good chorus. So for us, we usually go for a smooth, medium-bodied red wine like this Workhorse. It's a 100% Merlot from Robert Clay Vineyard in Mason, which is one of the best vineyards in the state.
Just interviewed him a couple episodes ago. So.
Yeah, Dan, and we have the same last name too.
Yeah.
That one I think is just something you could drink all day, all year, and we almost call that like mother-in-law wine, right? Like you could give that to anybody and they're gonna like it.
Yeah.
I think on the flip side of that, you always need a nice sparkling wine. So we do a Pet Nat. It's a rosé of Tempranillo here. Has a really nice like strawberries and cream, a little bit of salinity to it. Then having a nice skin contact wine, and then having something that is really like dad wine, right? So like this Touriga Nacional, really, really rich, deep, dark. It was 2021 vintage, so it's got some maturity to it. And I think having been at this now for 10 years, one of the nicest things is being able to age some wine now, because we used to have people go, oh, all your wines are good, but they all need a little age. You're like, well, I can't afford to age them right now.
Yeah, right?
So now we're finally at that point where we are able to lay down a quarter to a third of our production for proper maturity, and that's a wonderful thing too. So it's something to be celebrated.
All right. Well, so here in the tasting room, the winery itself, so do you do any kind of events or parties or things like that? What type of stuff do you do here?
Yeah, we try and have something fun and exciting for people to do every week, every month. I was just telling off air that one of the events that we do that we really love is called Bigger in Texas, where we invite all these other wineries who, we're scattered all across the state. We have a great, big, wonderful state, but it's really hard. If you were to like go tick off the boxes and hit all these wineries you want to hit, your vacation time is pretty filled up.
You got to have a motorhome to do
that. That's it. Yeah, and a chauffeur probably.
Yeah.
So that was an event that we did. We do this once or twice a year, depending on availability, where we bring in all these other wineries, host them here in sort of a fair style where it's $65 and you get to taste up to 60 wines essentially. There's no competition or anything like that, just pure enjoyment. And that's a great one. We'll be having our 10th birthday on May 4th. So we'll have, food, music, all that fun stuff, lots of kind of library wines, but we're always trying to make sure that there's an extra reason for you to be here. We do offer cheese and charcuterie boards, but a lot of times on the weekends we'll have a pop-up of, some different type of cuisine of a visiting chef. That's always fun too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about what it looks like if a customer said, I'm interested, I want to go check this place out. What does it look like for a first-time visitor for a tasting? So if someone comes in to do a tasting, what are the fees involved? Is there a set flight of wines? Do they pick their wines?
Yep.
Do they need reservations? What does that look like?
So we keep it really casual, almost confusingly easy. So there's no reservations unless there's a private event or, if you've got a large group, call and give us a heads up. But we ran a reservation system during COVID and things like that, and we like to keep those barriers to entry very small, right? So there's no reservations. Our capacity in here is about 180. So we've got lots of room. And with we're not doing the soufflés or anything like that, so we can turn tables pretty quickly. Tastings are a la carte, so there's no entry fee or something like that. you have all the wines are available by the glass and by the bottle, but a tasting, we do 3 wines for $20. It's a half a glass pour. So by the end of it, like you had a glass and a half of wine. We rotate what's available on the tasting menu every 2 weeks. So we have lots of new wines coming out all the time. With us making about 16 wines a year, we're changing more than once a month.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. And we have a reserve flight as well of some of our, like the Touriga and the Merlot are both on there. And oftentimes we'll pull out a library wine too of something cool.
A little special.
Yeah. But we keep it really, really straightforward and open for groups. There's, also we're dog friendly, which is really terrific. You can bring we're family friendly too. So, well-behaved children and dogs and adults. So it's not just, we don't want you to have to go get a babysitter to come try some wine.
I love that. What are your operating hours?
We're open Tuesday to Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday from 2 to 9 p.m., Friday, Saturday, Sunday, noon to 9 p.m.
Okay, perfect. And then you mentioned it a second ago. I want to delve in just a little bit more. Food type of options.
Yep.
You talked about having charcuterie
Yeah, we have
options.
cheese and charcuterie boards that we do here, sourcing everything from Antonelli, so it's domestic and international. Great stuff. I've been wise to keep off it. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks. So,
congratulations.
Thank you. And then we have a terrific food truck, Jerusalem street food called Reem's Falafel. So great vegetarian options, wonderful falafel, good spicy shawarma, all that, but all fresh and clean. And yeah, it's a good setup.
Nice. Do you have any maximum group sizes? Like if a bus rolled up into the parking lot or things like that?
No, we are non-discriminating like that. We're good. If you want to have a private event here, you can do seated up to like 120 for like a seated proper dinner.
Okay.
And then if you want to have like a big party, we can do 200 people in here. We've had like Uber's holiday
Mix
party
and
here.
mingle kind of thing.
Yeah. Big networking stuff. So it's really terrific.
So what would you say as an urban winery? I don't know if it's different, but what would you say are your busy and kind of slow seasons? What's the best time to come visit?
Well, I always say like if you want, a nice like intimate tasting where you can really chat and go through everything together, the week is always wonderful, or Sundays. Saturdays can be very busy. We've not done this as much lately, but we used to have so many bachelorettes and bachelor parties, which is totally fine, but there's just that comes with its own bag of accessories. I think I don't discourage anyone from coming at any time. Even if you're coming on a Saturday, it can be very lively and fun. But I promise you, we'll have glass in or wine in your glass in just a few minutes. So I always say that like if people are stressed out, our staff, I'm like, guys, remember you're just a flick of the wrist from solving the problem. So come anytime. I would say summer months are quieter because it's just so hot, but this is a really terrific time to visit. I think wine tastes great in this weather, and it's good for stocking up before we go nocturnal for the summer.
Yeah.
Well,
I would think a place like this might even have a little bit of a benefit during the summer in that
it's cool.
You're a nice air-conditioned place right in the middle of the city, so people aren't having to drive out in 110 degrees out into the country somewhere. Yeah. They can just come right here, right around the corner if they live in this area at least.
Yeah, that's another great thing too is, I'd say like of our customers, say now that we're in this area that's really developing quickly, but it's a lot of also like I live down here, I'm a first-time home buyer. It's a lot of young families, but there's also a lot of young professionals with all these apartment complexes popping up. And so it's really nice to see people like in a walkable community in Texas, which is hard to do. We're all spread out. So we get really nice, healthy traffic, a blend of tourists, locals, and wine enthusiasts. So yeah.
Well, do you offer any kind of a wine club that people can sign up for distribution? How's that work?
We have a wine club. It's really terrific. We have 2 levels: reds only or whites only, and you're either getting wine quarterly or semi-annually. So it's 3 bottles in each shipment. So you're only signed up for as little as half a case of wine. So if you can't drink 6 bottles of wine in a year, you're probably not my friend anyway.
Who are those people?
Yeah, right. They're like, oh, wow, we still got that. I'm like, are you hoarding? But one of the great things is you get a free glass of wine every time you visit, which is really terrific because then, for our local wine club members, like they become huge ambassadors because it's like, where do they want to meet for a drink? Well, where they get a free glass of wine. 15% off on all of your wine including your shipments, and some exclusive pre-releases, some things that are wine club only, and there's a great sort of intimacy and exchange with those customers, and they're always the lifeblood of your business. They're very important. So yeah, we're thankful for them.
Well, if somebody can't come in to visit, but they want to taste your wines, we touched on distribution a little bit. So tell me about where can people maybe taste your wines or find your wines if they can't come in?
We have a very big portfolio of wines, but I would say the wines that should be consistently available and you should be able to find at Whole Foods or Central Market, which I always think are kind of our most accessible retailers generally. This Pet Nat, this will sell out before the end of the summer for sure. That's kind of a seasonal one. This Mourvedre is really terrific from Limestone Terrace. I believe that's in both. Violet Crown, which I don't have on the table with me right now, but it's a purple dog with a crown on his head on the label. It's a Tempranillo. That's probably our most recognizable one. I'd say that'd be the one that you're most likely to find in off-premise. But keep your eye peeled. Once you see or have awareness of our wine, it seems to start to appear for you.
Yeah.
Right? But we don't do any marketing or spend any outside dollars on that. We focus it all on the wine. So, we kind of say our target audience is like an NPR listener, right? It kind of transcends socioeconomic status, but it's more about just being, a little more attentive, a little more clued in and discerning in that. So, yeah.
Well, and you mentioned a magnificent opportunity coming up. Your wines will soon be found possibly in Japan.
That's right. Yeah, we're just finishing a deal with distribution there. So William Chris is already there. We're not the first Texas wine there, but we do have a goal sort of to be one of the first Texas wines that's exposed or tasted critically by the world at large. So that doesn't mean we want to produce 60,000 cases. We want it to be healthy scarcity. But we really have enjoyed being an ambassador and a representative for our city, for our state, for our winery, and for our wine region.
Do you have any plans for future growth?
Yeah, we do. We're growing naturally, organically. We haven't had. One of the great things is that we are really employee owned. That can be a tough thing too. But we grow really based on our growth is really so tied to nature. So last year we were able to produce a really healthy amount of wine that's affording us the ability or requiring us, however you want to look at it, to expand our distribution, which is terrific. But you can't have any of these things happen without good work in the vineyard, without a little bit of luck from nature. And so, it's a lot of hard work on both ends, but yeah, we hope to grow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what, in your opinion, is the number one thing that really sets the Austin Winery apart that would make somebody say, I got to come check that place out?
Well, I think there's a wonderful thing is that people can get a glass of wine anywhere now. But what I think is really the real benefit of coming here is the education aspect that you have, where it's really transparent, where I really do believe we want to empower people to know more about wine so that when they select a wine, they get the most value out of it in terms of satisfaction, enhancing their experience. Another thing that I think is really, really important to me is that when you have a glass of wine here, you're not just supporting this business, this staff here, but you're supporting Texas agriculture. You're supporting a really low carbon footprint because this wine hasn't traveled far. I'm happy to distribute in Japan and those places. I'd love to sell all my wine right here because that has a much lower impact on the environment. I believe in walkable communities. I think politics, I think culture, I think everything starts local. And if we're not engaged in that at a local level, then, what's the point of sort of looking beyond that? So I love that aspect of it and the story and helping people understand how tied this is to nature and that each wine in itself is a snapshot of the climate and the characters of the year before or whenever that vintage came from. And so I think that really kind of, puts a light bulb on in your head of something that I like, something that I really appreciate what went into this, and that you're doing something that's helping sustain a good community. I would just say a lot of people will ask sometimes what natural wine is or what qualifies or what do you guys do. a couple things on it. There are no organically certified vineyards in Texas, okay? That does not mean that there's not really healthy and good positive farming practices. The path to getting organic certified is expensive, it's lengthy, and it also can be run off course by things that are beyond the farmer's control, neighbors spraying, things like that. So go for the transparency of vineyard practices rather than a sacramental symbol, right? Secondarily from that, what that means for us from a winemaking side is that we don't inoculate or introduce any yeast in our winemaking practice. Okay. Everything is native. So like we were saying, that ambient yeast from the vineyard, from in here, that fermentation starts and ends on its own. We don't filter any of our wines. So if you see any cloudiness or texture like that, years ago we were taught that was a flaw in wine, but that's really a advent of modern winemaking. And lastly, if we add any sulfur dioxide, we'll say so on the bottle. And I think most people now, the sort of general diaspora has said, okay, it's okay to be adding sulfur at bottling because that's all about protecting the longevity of the wine. It's not going to give you a headache. These are at very, very low thresholds. And these are about making sure you're not drinking vinegar and protecting the wine from oxidation. So that's what I'll say about that. But I value anyone's time who's listening to this. I value your time if you're coming to visit and taste with us. Please do. We're open 6 days a week and we'd love to have you.
All right, and that was Ross McLauchlan, the CEO and president of the Austin Winery. And by going to the Austin Winery, and when you enjoy their wines, you know that you are helping to contribute to their efforts to sustainability and helping the environment, and it becomes a community as well. And beyond that, it's just a really fun place to drink wine because you're surrounded by all the winemaking equipment, the barrels all around, even those cool clay amphoras there where they're making those wines. That's all active going on right around you while you're drinking those wines. And the area where they're located, the yard that he talked about, is actually a really hot and upcoming spot here in Austin. I've already heard of several other developments very similar to the yard springing up in that very same area. So in addition to all of the great things you can do there in the yard, like the sake and the distillery, the coffee place, there's some food in the area. That food, don't forget the food truck out front of the Austin Winery. But there are other places like that popping up as well. It should be a really hot spot for people to come and really enjoy a day out. And don't forget, you got to customize your trip there by bookending it. Start at the Austin Winery and then go see some of these other fun little places and then close it out at the Austin Winery. It will be a trip that you will remember. Now, as always, before you go, make sure you check out their website. It's www.theaustinwinery.com. And of course, on their website, you'll be able to read a little bit more about some of the philosophy that they put into creating this location, some of the things that Ross talked about in the interview, and that's, of course, detailed a little bit more on their website. You can also shop online for some of their wine if you want to have some of it shipped to you, see their full menu. You can find out information about renting the place out if you want to host an event there at the Austin Winery, and even more. So check that out. And don't forget, when you go to see them, make sure you tell them you heard about them on this podcast, Texas Under Vine. Now, after we wrapped up the interview and all the equipment was put away, Ross actually took me over to the bar and pulled out some of those great wines for me to try. And I gotta say, they did not disappoint. Being a red wine drinker personally myself, those are more my favorites. I loved several of the varietals that they had there. That Touriga that he talked about in the interview was really, really good, and enjoyed really what they've done with those red varietals and their take on those wines. But I have to say, the wine that surprised me the most were those white wines that he's made into an orange style. So my favorite, I think, of the whole tasting experience was their Albarino. And I've always had Albarino as this really bright white, clear, crisp white wine, but he did it in an orange style. So I got to try their Albarino, that is an orange style wine, had some really unique character flavors to it, some nuttiness to it, very different from a typical Albarino. And so whatever you know about white wines or about even things like Albarino, you got to put that out when you come to taste it because you're going to get a really cool, different type of tasting experience with those wines. And again, those orange wines are made kind of like a red wine. You just leave them on the skin. They get some more skin contact. So they get that kind of orange or amberish color from the skins. They develop a little bit of tannins to them that you don't normally see in white wines. So it's just a fun, interesting take on some wines that you don't typically get in a lot of places. So that was my library bottle for this episode. I had to go home with some of that. All right, well, my time here has come to a close, and it's time for me to move along to some other great wine destinations. But before I go, if you are getting any great information from this podcast, if you are enjoying it, if you're being able to go try some of these amazing destinations that I'm sharing with you, would you please consider leaving me a rating and review wherever you get this podcast? If you're watching it on YouTube, you can just click the like and subscribe button and maybe leave a comment if you've actually been to the Austin Winery. Tell me about your experience there and what some of your favorite things were. But those ratings and reviews really help the podcast get seen by even more people, and we can share this great state of Texas wine with more people who are not only natives to our state, but people who are coming in to travel to the state and want to learn about our wine experience here in Texas. And with that, my time is up. So don't forget, subscribe to my socials to be notified anytime the next episode is released. And until then, happy trails and bottoms up, y'all.
Thanks for listening to Texas Under Vine. We strive to provide you with the best information about wine businesses all over Texas. Be sure to check out our website at texasundervine.com and follow us on our socials at Texas Under Vine to stay up on all the upcoming episodes. Please email us with any suggestions or feedback. Also, contact us if you're interested in donating, sponsoring, or advertising on the podcast, just to help us cover our expenses and bring even more great info to you in future episodes. Above all, travel safely, and most especially, drink responsibly. Vine Trippers, have I got a deal for you. So if you haven't checked out the Texas Wine Club yet, you have to go check it out. So you can get wine clubs at all of these different great wineries that I've talked about in the episodes. But if you can't get a chance to get to those places and you want to sample some of those various wines, this is the perfect fit for this podcast. So I've partnered with Texas Wine Club. If you go to their website, they scour the whole state. They choose great wines from all over the Texas wineries, and they put them together into packs that they ship out every quarter. You could pick out a package of 3, 6, or 9 bottles, and every quarter you can get a taste of different wineries throughout Texas without having to travel to them. So if you've wanted to taste some of the great wine I've talked about on this podcast, here's your chance without having to travel. So what you're going to want to do is go to www.txwine.com and pick your package that you want to try. And when you put in my code, Texas Under Vine, that's all one word, TEXASUNDERVINE, as your coupon code, you'll get $20 off your purchase. So head on over there. You can also find the link in the show notes here for this podcast, and go check out Texas Wine. They're a perfect fit with this podcast. So go drink some great wine.